There are places where noise never sleeps, where lights never truly go out, and where the soul slowly forgets how to be still. Many people travel seeking opportunity, excitement, success, but few stop to ask what unseen energies shape their thoughts, their habits, their faith. Today, I invite you to reflect deeply, not from fear, but from awareness. Because sometimes the greatest danger is not what attacks you openly, it is what influences you silently. If you are walking a spiritual path, you must learn not only where to go, but also where not to remain. When people speak about certain powerful cities, they often speak with excitement in their voices. They talk about opportunity, about growth, about dreams becoming reality. They describe streets that never sleep, offices that never close, ambitions that never rest. And at first, this sounds inspiring. It sounds like a place where life is happening at full speed. But if you observe more carefully, you begin to notice something deeper. You begin to see that in an environment where movement never stops, the soul rarely finds a moment to breathe. Human beings are not machines. We are not created to constantly perform, constantly produce, constantly chase the next achievement. Yet there are places where this relentless pursuit becomes the unspoken rule. If you slow down, you feel left behind. If you rest, you feel guilty. If you choose faith over advancement, people may look at you as though you are wasting your potential. This pressure does not always come from others directly. Often it is absorbed silently through the atmosphere itself. You begin to measure your worth by how busy you are, by how exhausted you feel at the end of the day, by how much you can endure without breaking. And slowly, without realizing it, prayer becomes shorter, reflection becomes rare. Church becomes something you attend only when time allows, and time never allows. Your thoughts are filled with deadlines, comparisons, expectations. Even when you sit in silence, your mind continues to run. The body may be still, but the inner world is restless. This is how spiritual exhaustion begins, not with dramatic events, but with small compromises repeated over months and years. There is also another danger hidden within endless opportunity. When everything seems possible, nothing feels sufficient. You reach one goal, and immediately another appears. You gain recognition, and soon it loses its meaning. Satisfaction becomes temporary, almost unreachable. Faith teaches contentment and gratitude, yet environments driven purely by ambition train the opposite. They train hunger without fulfillment. They teach that peace will come after the next success. But the next success never truly arrives as peace. It only opens another door to more striving. Christians must be aware that opportunity itself is not evil, growth is not evil, work is not evil, is not. But when ambition begins to replace devotion, when achievement begins to define identity, when rest begins to feel like weakness, something essential is being lost. You may win the world's approval while quietly losing your inner connection with God. This loss is rarely noticed until the heart feels empty despite visible success. So learn to observe not only what a place offers you materially, but what it slowly takes from you spiritually. Because a life filled with motion but empty of meaning is not true progress. When you walk through certain cities at night, the lights are dazzling, the music is loud, and the streets are alive with movement that never stops. People call it excitement. They call it culture. They call it nightlife. But if you look closer, you begin to see how this constant celebration of pleasure and indulgence affects the spirit. When a city's rhythm is built around parties, clubs, and endless entertainment, it does more than entertain. It conditions. It slowly teaches people to accept behaviors that once felt wrong, even dangerous, as ordinary. The danger is subtle. It does not announce itself with a warning. It whispers instead. Night after night, exposure to excess begins to dull the sensitivity of the soul. When every weekend is filled with loud music, alcohol, lights, and distractions, the heart becomes numb to deeper truths. What was once shocking or uncomfortable now becomes normal. Sin rarely presents itself in an obvious, frightening form. It often arrives as fun, as an invitation, as something harmless. And when you are surrounded by it constantly, the line between right and wrong begins to blur. This is why Christians must guard not only their actions but also the spaces they inhabit. It is not enough to pray on Sunday and forget about the rest of the week. Spiritual vigilance requires awareness of environment. Every city has its own spiritual climate. Some places are warm and nurturing, inviting reflection and growth. Others are cold and draining, subtly encouraging habits that separate you from your faith. A city where nightlife dominates teaches you to value distraction over devotion. It replaces meaningful connection with temporary pleasure. And this replacement is often invisible until the effects are deep, until prayer becomes less frequent, until your conscience grows quiet. The influence of constant indulgence is not limited to what you do. It extends to what you see, what you hear, what you think about. Social circles form around these activities. Acceptance is tied to participation. Slowly, choices are no longer made from conviction, but from conformity. Even the smallest compromises begin to feel necessary for belonging. And as this happens, spiritual sensitivity, that quiet ability to discern right from wrong, weakens. Yet this warning is not meant to condemn you. It is meant to awaken awareness. You are not powerless. You can enter a city and still protect your soul, but it requires intentionality. It requires the courage to say no when everything around you says yes. It requires the discipline to find silence amid the noise. And most importantly, it requires the humility to recognize that even subtle, repeated exposure to darkness can erode your faith if left unchecked. Do not underestimate the power of a city that glorifies night and pleasure. Its influence may not hit you at once, but over time, it seeps into the heart. Guard your presence carefully, because what seems exciting today can become spiritually dangerous tomorrow. There are cities where success is measured not by character, not by kindness, not by faith, but by what you own, display, or consume. The streets are lined with luxury cars, high-end stores, and towering buildings that seem to shout, "This is what matters." When you enter such a place, it is easy to be mesmerized. Even without meaning to, you begin to compare yourself with those around you. You start counting what you have against what they have. And slowly, without realizing it, your sense of worth begins to shift. Materialism is a silent teacher. It does not confront you with commands or moral lessons. It simply surrounds you with constant messages that your value is in your possessions, that your identity is tied to appearance, and that happiness is purchased rather than cultivated. For a Christian, this is dangerous because the faith teaches detachment, gratitude, and contentment. But an environment focused entirely on accumulation does the opposite. It trains the heart to crave more, to measure life in terms of things rather than purpose, and to seek approval from the world rather than God. When everyone around you lives as though what they own defines them, even small compromises begin to feel necessary. You start to believe that success requires display, that happiness requires acquisition, and that respect requires imitation. And what begins as admiration soon becomes pressure, then expectation, then subtle manipulation of the soul. Your heart, which once found peace in prayer and simplicity, becomes restless. Gratitude is replaced with desire. Humility is replaced with comparison. The more you chase what the world says matters, the further you drift from what truly sustains the spirit. Materialism also blinds the soul in quieter ways. It teaches impatience because the world promises that everything is attainable now if you just work hard enough. It teaches distraction because the mind is constantly calculating what to get next. And it teaches forgetfulness because when the heart is focused on external treasures, it often forgets to treasure what is eternal. Faith is not just about resisting sin. It is about remembering where your value comes from and about building a life aligned with truth rather than appearances. Cities that glorify material wealth are not inherently evil. They offer opportunities, comfort, and innovation. But Christians must enter these places with caution. You must ask yourself, am I being shaped by this environment, or am I shaping myself according to my faith? Am I chasing possession, or am I cultivating purpose? Am I measuring success by the world's standard or by God's? Guard your heart. Do not let the glitter of wealth and luxury convince you that what shines on the outside reflects the true state of the soul. True contentment, true value, and true peace are never found in what you own. They are found in who you are and whose you are. There are cities where noise never truly stops. The hum of traffic, the constant chatter, the flashing screens, the advertisements competing for attention, all of it creates a kind of invisible pressure, a relentless current pulling at the mind. At first, it may seem harmless, even energizing. The city feels alive, vibrant, full of opportunity and life. But if you stay long enough, you begin to realize that constant noise does more than fill your ears. It fills your mind. It leaves little room for reflection, for silence, for listening to the subtle guidance that comes from within. Humans are built to need quiet. Not just physical quiet, but mental and spiritual quiet. It is in stillness that the heart can speak, that conscience can whisper, that the soul can recognize truth. When we are surrounded by relentless sound, we begin to lose the ability to hear ourselves, and even more, the ability to hear God. Decisions are made hastily, thoughts become scattered, and reflection, the very act of discerning what is right and wrong, becomes a rare practice. In such environments, even the strongest faith can weaken, not through attack, but through omission. The soul becomes starved of silence, and in its hunger, it grows restless, anxious, and disconnected. Noise also distracts in ways we may not immediately recognize. Screens, flashing lights, constant alerts, all of these pull attention outward, toward endless streams of information and activity. A mind constantly pulled in 100 directions cannot focus on what matters most. Meditation, prayer, and contemplation, which require intentional focus, become difficult, uncomfortable even. Over time, spiritual habits are neglected, and the subtle voice of conscience, which relies on careful attention, becomes faint. Some cities are designed intentionally to keep people distracted. Consumer culture thrives on keeping attention divided, energy spent on things that do not nourish the soul. Social interactions become shallow because everyone is so busy reacting to stimuli instead of reflecting on meaning. Loneliness, paradoxically, grows even in crowded spaces because the soul is seeking connection in an environment that values noise over depth. Christians must recognize this danger and protect their inner space. Being in a bustling city does not require spiritual defeat, but it does require vigilance. You must create silence within, even when the world is loud around you. You must intentionally carve out moments for prayer, reflection, and stillness. These practices are not optional. They are essential for maintaining discernment and spiritual clarity. Otherwise, you risk being swept along by currents you do not even see, losing touch with the voice that guides, corrects, and strengthens. Do not underestimate the power of a noisy environment. What seems like harmless activity can slowly erode your ability to hear, to reflect, and to remain grounded in faith. Guard your mind, protect your spirit, and learn to find stillness even in the heart of chaos. There is a quiet but powerful force at work in many cities, one that does not announce itself with bright lights or loud music, but with the subtle weight of social expectation. When you enter a place where the culture is different from your own, it may not feel threatening at first. You see how people dress, how they speak, what they value, and you may even admire it. At first, it seems harmless, perhaps even exciting, but over time, repeated exposure begins to shape you in ways you may not notice. Social pressure does not demand that you change, but it encourages small compromises that slowly shift your moral compass. Humans are social creatures. We desire acceptance, friendship, and belonging. When you are surrounded by people whose values are very different from yours, it becomes natural to adjust. Perhaps you begin by excusing small behaviors you once would have avoided. Then, little by little, those compromises grow. The city does not coerce you with force, it coaxes you with repetition. What is unusual today becomes normal tomorrow. What feels uncomfortable at first becomes acceptable over time. And without awareness, the heart gradually begins to drift from its foundation. This is why Christians must be mindful not only of what they do, but of where they place themselves. Being in a morally challenging environment is not inherently evil. We are not meant to isolate ourselves from the world entirely. But repeated exposure, without reflection, can erode the strength of conviction. Choices that once felt clear and non-negotiable begin to feel flexible. Values that were once firm become negotiable. And when the environment constantly reinforces behaviors and attitudes that conflict with faith, the soul becomes at risk. Social pressure also affects the mind subtly. It teaches that compromise is necessary for acceptance. It teaches that standing firm is difficult and lonely. It teaches that convenience and conformity are more practical than principle. These lessons are absorbed not through argument, but through observation and repetition. You may not notice the change until it has taken root. By then, the decisions you make daily may have drifted far from the values you once held dear, and faith that was once vibrant may feel weakened or distracted. The danger is amplified because it is slow and often invisible. You may feel perfectly comfortable in a city filled with influences you do not fully understand. You may even feel successful, popular, or accomplished. Yet if your moral boundaries are being quietly reshaped, your spiritual foundation is at risk. Awareness is the first line of defense. You must constantly observe not just what surrounds you, but how it shapes your thoughts, your desires, and your behavior. Learn to recognize the subtle ways social influence works. Guard your convictions carefully. Surround yourself with reminders of truth, and nurture relationships that strengthen rather than dilute your faith. What seems like harmless conformity today may determine the strength of your soul tomorrow. Choose carefully where you walk, because the company a city keeps can shape the very essence of who you are. Some cities shine so brightly that it is easy to believe they are full of life, energy, and promise. Skyscrapers glint in the sun, streets buzz with activity, and entertainment fills every corner. From the outside, everything looks vibrant, successful, and exciting. People are drawn to these places, thinking that the energy of the city will lift them, inspire them, and help them achieve their dreams. But the truth is often hidden beneath this glittering surface. A city can look alive, yet be spiritually empty. It can offer stimulation without meaning, excitement without purpose, and noise without reflection. When the heart is exposed only to the external, it begins to crave the visible rather than the eternal. People become focused on what can be touched, bought, or displayed, and lose sight of what cannot be measured by wealth or entertainment. A place may appear full of life, but if it leaves the soul restless, anxious, or hollow, then it is spiritually dangerous. Christians are particularly vulnerable to environments that are dazzling on the surface but lack nourishment for the inner life. The human spirit needs more than stimulation. It needs meaning, connection, and a sense of purpose aligned with God. The danger of such environments is that they mask emptiness with glamour. It is easy to be distracted by achievements, success, and culture, and forget to ask, am I thriving spiritually? Am I growing in faith? Am I cultivating a life that honors God? When a city keeps you moving from one spectacle to another, you may begin to accept surface-level satisfaction as fulfillment. The heart can become accustomed to constant excitement, and the quiet voice of spiritual hunger goes unheard. Over time, this leads to a disconnection from what truly sustains the soul. In such cities, it is crucial to learn discernment. Not every bright, bustling, or culturally rich place is spiritually harmful, but Christians must train their awareness to sense what nourishes and what drains. Some environments subtly teach that appearances matter more than integrity, that activity matters more than devotion, that popularity matters more than purpose. Spiritual emptiness is not always loud or dramatic. It often creeps in quietly, wrapped in the excitement of opportunity and achievement. Being aware of this does not mean avoiding every city or opportunity. It means cultivating a sense of spiritual discernment, so that even in a dazzling environment, you can maintain connection with God. It means asking daily, am I chasing what is temporary or what is eternal? Am I feeding my soul or only my senses? When the external begins to overshadow the internal, faith suffers. A place that looks full of life can, in fact, be spiritually draining if your soul is not anchored. Learn to see beyond the surface. The lights, the noise, and the glamour cannot replace purpose, truth, or divine connection. Choose environments that feed your soul as well as your mind, because true life is measured not by what you experience externally, but by the peace, clarity, and fulfillment that grow quietly within. Never mistake external shine for spiritual life.